Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allison Turner. I am the founder of Batcat Media Group, which is also home to my two other brands, Dream Plan Start Grow, which is my podcast, and The Allison Turner, which is my speaking brand. I want to jump on today and talk a little bit about taking action. And I think it's a good reminder for anyone in business, but, excuse me, it's a great reminder for anyone in business, but also, the other thing that's important is when you come back from an event. So I was at a business retreat last week, and one of the things that I noticed is sometimes when we come back from an event, life happens, business happens, everything happens, and then you don't implement anything. You have all these great ideas because you're with different people. Sometimes you get to mastermind, you get different ideas from the speakers, and then boom, you don't do anything about it. And I've seen that in myself in previous times, not all the time, but some of the time. And I see it in other people too. And even in, if you're a solopreneur, say, and you're newer in business, sometimes just new knowledge is so exciting. And maybe we jump on a webinar and so exciting. We're like, yeah, I'm going to implement this new thing. And then nothing happens because you don't set the time aside to make it happen. And that's so important. I mean, interestingly enough, I just had Barbara Majewski on my podcast. I haven't released it yet, but one of the things we talked about was how, people do so much personal development, especially business owners. It's so necessary to, keep leveling yourself up. But then, we read, we watch or listen to podcasts, we watch videos, and then nothing gets implemented sometimes, and how important it is to take action. So I wanted to jump on and talk about 5 tips to taking action and helping you take action, especially when you're coming off a conference, an event, whatever it is. It could just be a simple webinar, and maybe you heard something that you're like, "Oh, wow, that would be super cool for my business." And I'm gonna reference this specifically to business, but it could really be anything in life. Say you are just trying, you're working to level yourself up. You read this great book, but then you don't implement anything out of the book. What good? I mean, what good's a book? I mean, it was great to read it. It was great to get some extra knowledge, but if you're not implementing anything, then was it really worth your time and effort? And that's really the $1,000,000 question. So, first tip is review and organize your notes. And I did this today. So I did this retreat Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday last week. I went to see a friend Friday, Saturday, and I came back Sunday. And then yesterday I was frantically getting back into my week. But this morning I went through all my notes because I'd taken pretty in depth notes, and I went through at least all my notes on my computer. I still have some handwritten notes I need to go through. And I have a whiteboard in my home office. And so I took off a lot of what was on it and reconfigured it basically and said, okay, here's the things that I'm looking to implement. One thing was already implemented, and then there were some other ones that are kind of on the to-do list. And then I looked at November, December and wrote down action steps for November, December, or goals, I should say, goals for November, December. And then below that, I wrote down action steps. So right now I have 2 things scheduled. I have 2 webinars scheduled, and one in a couple weeks and one I think in maybe 4 weeks. So I have those scheduled. So those are action steps. And then I have to create the rest of the action steps. So that was the first thing was, hey, let me write all this out so I can see kind of the big picture and make sure I'm not missing anything. And, I have everything in front of me. Because when you're reading notes, at least for me, when I'm reading notes, I'm scrolling down, and I need to see everything at one glance. I need to see a big picture and then figure out how do I break this big picture out? And then I can also prioritize while I'm doing it. So here's what I need to do in November, December. And then I started looking at 2024 and just put some kind of big picture goals in 2024. And obviously I haven't broken those out yet, but I want to make sure I get through most of what I had on my November, December list first. and then prioritize prioritize everything else out over the course of 2024. So number 2, follow up with contacts. So a lot of times we go to these events and we meet new people, or maybe you had met the person before and just hadn't had that in-depth conversation that was so enlightening or whatever. And so follow up with those contacts. And this is one of the things I really need to do. I haven't done this yet. But if you took a business card, if you connected with someone, if you whatever that was, even if it was like people, one person, sometimes it's just that one person that can really make or break that experience, right? So follow up, you can send an email, pick up the phone and call them, connect with them on LinkedIn, depending on who it is and how you connected, then follow up appropriately, right? And then can any of those people help you moving forward? So for example, I have a podcast. Could I have some of them as guests on my podcast? Would they be good guests? Absolutely. So let's figure out how to make them a guest. Things like that, like what do I do for those next steps? And then share the knowledge that you gained with if you have a team. So some of us in business have a team. I've built a team over time and I can share some of that knowledge with my team, right? So that's important. So when I, go to an event or, and I just went to that business retreat, I get that knowledge. I want to share with my team so they see the big picture as well. Because what good is if I just see the big picture and then I'm like, okay, we need to do this, this, and this, and they're like, why are we doing all this stuff? They need to see the big picture as well. So share any knowledge that you got with your team. So for example, before I went, we had already started working on a webinar and a course that Jack and I will co-present. So Jack's my video producer and I'm more the marketing side and the coaching side. So we'd already started, we'd come up with the name of the event. We had come up with the bullet points for it. I haven't started building out the webinar yet. I haven't built out the course yet, but those pieces are done, right? So now I need to show him kind of the bigger picture of like, now what do we do? What's those next steps? Because then once we build those out, then, hey, we can start marketing the webinar. Here's how we're going to do it because we talked about that. And then prioritize actionable items. And I talked about this earlier because I went through everything I had written down or at least typed onto my computer from the conference of the business retreat I just went to and prioritize those things. So I have like a November, December goals list. I haven't fully prioritized this yet because I just wrote it out today. But that's going to be my next step is, okay, here's the list. And it's a pretty long list. But I figure I have two pretty good months. And usually November, December aren't as busy for me as say January. So I'm going to make some time to get a lot of this list done. My next steps will be to prioritize what do I do first. I mean, some are as simple as buy some domains that, apply to this course or apply to this webinar or apply to this mini course. So something like that, I could knock out maybe in an afternoon. I think there was like 4 or 5 domains I need to purchase. So maybe I can do that in an afternoon. So things like that I am able to do and then prioritize how I do them. I look at my week. I look at what I need to get done, what I need to get accomplished. So like this week is super busy because I'm doing a speaking contest tomorrow night. And then on Saturday, I have a couple of speeches I'm giving for Toastmasters and I need to prep for those as well. So things like that, most of these things won't get done this week, but at least I have the list. And now over the weekend or maybe later this week, I'll take a look at the list and start prioritizing when and how these are going to get done. And then evaluate and reflect. Really look at your experience that you had and think about like what went well, what could have gone differently. Did it change anything for you? Especially if you're in business. When we go to these business retreats, we go to these, even if you jump online and you go to a webinar online or whatever you do, so often I come out with it, I'm like, "Oh, wow, I wanna do this." But you have to really be clear, "Okay, what are my goals? Like, here's my big vision, and here are my goals, and how does this fit in with this?" Because usually, if it completely shifts your direction, then there might be a problem. But u usually, you take something away where you can really evaluate, "How is that gonna impact my business? How can I make it work even better?" So, and then set reminders. So once you go through these 5 steps, again, the 5 steps are review and organize your notes, follow up with any contacts that you made at the event. So even online events, I make contacts at online events. I mean, I've interviewed people for my podcast, but not because I ever met them in person, but because I met them through an online event. Share knowledge with your team. You know, anything you brought back, share that knowledge with your team. Prioritize any actionable items, and then evaluate and reflect. And then once you're kind of getting to that point, review, look at set, let me rephrase that. Set date for these items. Because really you want to review your progress on all these action items. So like I have these goals I want to get done in November, December. It's a pretty long list, but I need to set dates to make sure I get through each of these. So as I said, once I get through this week, I'm going to start looking at my calendar for November. Here's what I want to accomplish in November. And then look at my calendar in December. Here's what I want to accomplish in December, and really set those dates and check, prioritize it, but then check in with someone. So whether it's I'm checking in with my team, say, hey, we're going to get these things done, the last quarter, or I'm going to have an accountability partner, whatever works for you, but make sure you're checking in with people to really get that done. And I'd love to connect with you. So if you want to connect any further with me, you can check out my website, theallisonturner.com, because I always love meeting new people, helping new people. Because when I started this business 10 years ago, I didn't have these mentors. I didn't have any of these people in my life. So I really want to help anyone that needs that help, especially if you're starting out in business or maybe you're a solopreneur really looking for those next steps. But thank you for everyone who was able to check in today. And just think, 5 tips to action. Action's what makes us get what we want. Action's what helps us achieve our goals. So whether that's in business, whether that's in your life, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't just go to events. Don't just read that book or listen to that podcast. Find something that interests you and take action. Thank you very much for jumping on. I hope everyone has a fabulous evening, and I look forward to seeing you again later this week. Bye for now.